This is Street Knowledge with Chris Graham.
Welcome to the podcast. Chris Graham and Zach Pereles. We're going to talk some UVA basketball today. It is Wednesday, and we're still, about 3 days away from Saturday night. Number 2 Duke, number 3 UVA, the round 2 as ESPN's billing it. I hope what they're implying there is that there's subsequent rounds that we could see this series play out even further. ACC tournament, Final Four, you just don't know. But we know we have a round 2 coming up Saturday night in Charlottesville, and game day will be on hand. It's going to be a big event. UVA basketball is used to this kind of environment now. And the fans want to know, first off, Zach, they want to know what none of us really know outside of folks in the program. But what's the latest on Ty Jerome? We're all scouring the internet. We're all clicking on whatever we can find in terms of headlines. Do we really know any more about Ty's status heading into Saturday?
Yeah, Virginia, the short answer is no. Virginia's played it really close to the vest. Tony Bennett has said that he's improving, which you would hope he is. That's pretty much the natural order of having an injury and then getting some time off. But basically, I know nothing. I don't think anybody knows anything more than what Tony Bennett has said, which is he's improving, but we're going to have to see how we can work through a full week of practice. Obviously, they have this full week off, which meant that they took Sunday and Monday off, but have practiced Tuesday. Today's Wednesday. They'll practice today, and then Thursday and Friday leading into the game as well. So how Ty Jerome really handles those 4 days of practice, and obviously he might not be 100% at all of those practices. It might be something where he's building up to it. Maybe he's not a full participant in all of the drills. But backs are a tough thing, and Tony Bennett basically said that he has a sprained back. That was really the extent of the details he would go into. Backs are tough because it's just one little movement and you can re-aggravate, one of the many muscles in your back. So it's a tough thing. It's one of these things where you certainly don't want to rush him back, because if if he's feeling pretty good and then he re-aggravates it, then the process can start all over again. You want him to be pretty much 100% or as close to it, so that it's not something that nags at him, throughout the rest of the season and into the postseason. But the short answer is no, we don't have a whole lot of an update on Ty Jerome.
Folks out there who've had back issues themselves can identify with this. I considered myself in college anyway a somewhat competitive pickup basketball player, and there were 2 times in my first year at UVA I'd play basketball like every night, every day, almost every day, a couple hours every day after classes, in between studying, whatever else. And I remember, so I suffered a back spasm, pretty simple thing. I was actually just warming up to go into a pickup game, and kind of turned on a turnaround jump shot as I was warming up and felt this sharp pain. And then, had to go to the doctor for that. And then 3 or 4 weeks later, kind of like you were talking about there, Zach, another simple thing, playing in a game. Neither of these were tremendous, like jolts or anything else, just little movements re-triggered that spasm. And so for a couple more weeks, I was ginger walking around. It was tough. And I haven't, fortunately, that was 30 years ago. I haven't had anything like that since. But, yes, backs are very bulky in that sense. And, going back and looking at it, the NC State game, I don't know what play it was. It was probably pretty early in that game where Ty had the issue. He started not being able to really – we talked about this on the podcast last week. He was having trouble with ball pressure, which he normally never does. He was kind of backing his guy down as he was trying to set the offense at the top, which he never does. And so he was clearly affected during the game. And, you have to be careful. You got to be careful with this because, you're exactly right. He could be feeling great right now, feeling great Saturday night at about 6 o'clock, and one wrong move, and it could all go down. And so I understand, and also understand this too. Coach K played some gamesmanship with Trey Jones' status going into the first game. And so, Tony Bennett's returning the favor here. Not saying anything definitive, maybe making Coach K and his staff prepare for a lot of different scenarios going into round 2.
Yeah, absolutely. That does make sense. There's no reason for Tony Bennett to come out and say, hey, we're going to have Ty, or hey, we're not going to have Ty. And that way Duke is preparing for whether they have Ty Jerome or not. I think another important thing, just going back to the back injury real quick, is that progress sometimes with back injuries isn't always linear. It's not like I'm feeling better today and I'm feeling better the next day and, now I'm really feeling better. Sometimes it's, I wake up and my back doesn't feel quite like it normally should, or, I felt good yesterday and then maybe I slept in a weird position and don't feel as good today. But I think the main thing is that, going back to the base of this, Ty Jerome needs to be a guy who's healthy 4 weeks from now. Maybe UVA needs him to be a guy who's healthy 2 weeks from now. But basically, they need him to be a guy who's healthy from whenever he gets back to throughout the end of the season. This can't be one of these things where he comes back, re-aggravates it, then he misses another week or two. I think they really want to make sure he's 100%. Whether Virginia earns a 1 seed or a 2 seed or a 3 seed isn't really as concerning as if they were to earn one of those 3 seeds and not have Ty Jerome for the postseason.
So let's ask the question this way, because that fans out there are thinking along these lines too. Let's start with worst case scenario, at least just short term, Saturday night. Ty Jerome is not available. What does Virginia do to figure out how to win a game against Duke without Ty Jerome being in the lineup?
Well, that's a tough one, and obviously that is
question, right?
Case scenario. One of the things that I think you have to look for is you're going to need really good play out of the guys who have struggled a little bit recently, and the main one is Kyle Guy. He's a guy who's 7 for his last 26 from the field. Obviously, that's with one game of Ty Jerome kind of limping through with a bad back, and then one game without Ty Jerome. I think Kyle Guy is the one person who really needs this week off. He runs more than any other player I see in the ACC. He's constantly coming off screens. Against NC State, he was having to beat the pressure as well with Ty not feeling great. He works so hard on offense and on defense. I think that's going to be the one guy who will have to step up in his stead. DeAndre Hunter, obviously, we saw him be really good against Duke the last game. But the big thing is they have to be better defending Duke's 2 best players, who are R.J. Barrett and Zion Williamson. It's a lot easier said than done, and I'll have some video analysis out on how they can do a little bit better job on Zion. But you look at this Duke team, and it has probably at least 3 lottery picks in the next NBA draft. Maybe even Trey Jones goes as well, and he could be a lottery pick. It's just a really good team, a really talented team, a really talented group of individuals, and sometimes that group of individuals is hard to overcome. Virginia's going to have to play really smart, really solid. The things that you think about with UVA basketball is they run good offense. They don't turn the ball over. They play solid defense, and they don't allow easy shots. Against Duke, they did a good job of not turning the ball over, but Duke got a lot of good shots. I think without Ty Jerome, UVA has to play pretty close to a perfect game. With Jerome, they have to play, it's still a really good Duke team. Let's not forget how good this team is, how talented its top 2 players are. So without Ty Jerome, they've got to get back to making shots late in the shot clock, and that's going to start with Kyle Guy.
I think I'll go with whether it's the best case scenario or just the likely scenario. There's no indication that Ty's not going to play. Even if, of course, that could mean it could be best case for Virginia's long term. If he's hurt, don't play him. Don't put him out there in a situation where he's going to have issues in March, which is more important. But let's just assume he does play because the indications are that I guess that he will. It's still a tough game. Obviously, this is still that same Duke team that has all these top draft picks. The two top guys in Williamson and Barrett. Cam Reddish, who's a little further down the list, but also expected to be a top pick in the draft coming out after freshman year. I think you need to see Kihei Clark play a bigger role. He played a lot of minutes, and surprisingly to me, in the first game, considering Trey Jones didn't play in that game, and as a result, Kihei was 9-10 inches shorter than anyone else on the floor, but he played good defense. He got in R.J. Barrett's face a good bit. Barrett still had a 30-point game, but at least Kihei was there to sort of spell Jerome and Guy how UVA likes to switch its perimeter guys in terms of who they cover from possession to possession. So he was a good change up there as far as that goes, but he'll be more effective, I think, against Trey Jones. I think also what will be key here, and I want to get your thoughts on this, Zach. I think that a key to this is going to be seeing Virginia counter more with, assuming again that Ty is healthy, counter more with a 4-guard lineup. And I say 4 guards. That's not necessarily 4-6-2 guys. We're talking about Virginia's 4-guard lineup with Jerome and Guy and Hunter as guards in Virginia's lineup. Braxton Key and Clark getting some more minutes, so that what that can do is put more pressure on Zion Williamson to have to guard someone on the perimeter, drag him away from the basket. He's known as a great shot blocker, but he's more of a help side shot blocker. And if you can pull him out on the perimeter more, you can take away that from him at least. Either that or he's going to leave a guy open for an open 3. But if you can play some more 4-guard, he's either out there on DeAndre Hunter or Braxton Key, pulled away from the hoop a little bit more. That can open up the middle, open up those driving lanes for Virginia. We saw Virginia have success in the first matchup driving the ball after spreading the floor. And I think the more 4-guards you see, the more success you're going to see Saturday night.
Yeah, I agree with you there, and I think UVA's kind of been, when they've been healthy, they've kind of been trending that way. Obviously, they start the 2 bigs with Diakite and Salt, but I agree with you there. I think what UVA did well in the last game against Duke is that they were able to spread the floor with those 4 guys and then use ball screens to get switches with Marcus Bolden, the big man for Duke.
Yeah.
He's a pretty good defender, but he's obviously much more comfortable towards the basket. Let's not forget, UVA went to Duke and only lost by 2 points. It was not that big of a margin of defeat. I think that I agree with you there. If they can get 4 ball handlers on the floor, Duke, ever since that Virginia game, has been trying to switch everything. Kind of before that, they were trying to get everybody to scramble back to their original matchup. Now they've just, for the last few games, starting with that Virginia game, they've been switching everything, and that's tough for a guy like Bolden. And if you go back and watch that game, you'll see UVA really did try to attack him. I think a similar game plan could be really beneficial. The thing I think that'll be important for Virginia is if they do get that guard matchup on Bolden and then they drive and have Zion come over, the 2 things that I've noticed from Duke is that they help really hard. They do hunt those block shots. They're one of the best shot blocking teams in the nation. And 2, they go after every pump fake, every little fake here, every pass fake. They're extremely aggressive. And when you can use that aggression against them, that's when you can get open looks, you can get open threes. And unfortunately for UVA, they didn't make those open threes in the last game. If they hit 2 more open threes in this game than they did last game, they probably got a good chance to win.
I think also, so talking that through, it seems like that, because you've written it in the last week or so for us about the importance of the big men. I mean, Virginia starts 2 forward/centers, post guys, in Mamadi Diakite and Jack Salt, and then Jay Huff is the big off the bench. But as you've noted, 80% of the minutes come from it's basically a 4-guard lineup with 1 big out there on the floor with them. So those 3 guys really, for the most part, share that role. They share that 40 minutes almost together. And I think in this game, then, it's going to be very important for, I think, really key for Mamadi Diakite and Jay Huff to be effective in the minutes they get. And if they're effective, they'll get more minutes in that 5 slot, because they're guys they're versatile. They can score from the perimeter, they can score from the mid-range, and of course they can score on the dives too, so that when, if Duke continues its trend and switches on all the screens, then those guys are going to be able to beat you 3 ways. Jack Salt can beat you on the dive. He can finish around the rim, but really outside of about 4 feet, Jack's pretty ineffective. But so if we can get some early productivity out of Jay Huff, Mamadi Diakite, I think that's going to be key to seeing this offense really hum.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to note when we talk about, the big man position, the thing that makes Duke so good is that their second most used lineup right now over the past 5 games has Zion Williamson as the center. When the guy is 6'8" and 285 pounds, 6'7", 285 pounds, and can jump and can play that position and rebound like a center and then handle the ball like a guard, it's really tough to match up. I think you mentioned Huff and Diakite. I really think that this is a Diakite game because when you look at the athleticism across the board, Diakite is a guy who can defend all 5 positions if he has to. We've seen at times Jack Salt, even at times against the Duke game, in the Duke game, Jack Salt went up against Zion, and that was probably, the 2 most physical players in the ACC, or 2 of them. I think, again, though, this will be a really important game for Diakite, who struggled in the last game, because he's versatile enough to guard Zion. He's versatile enough to, guard all 5 positions if he has to. And then on the other end, he's athletic. He can finish off lobs. I think it's going to be really important for him to play well, and he's trending in the right direction. That Duke game was probably his worst game in ACC play. So he said after the Miami game, he said, the team is going to come right. They're going to come right to play, and they're going to leave it on the floor. And I think, in order for that to happen, Diakite is going to have to be one of the guys who comes ready to play.
I throw this out now for discussion. We have the game tape from a couple weeks ago down in Durham, but Trey Jones didn't play in that game, and he will play Saturday night. And so the factor of Trey Jones, it's a different team. Now, I personally thought that Duke and think that Duke matches up better with Virginia with Jones not in that mix. And it's I'm sure Duke fans, it would be heresy if I was talking to them about this. Jones is a solid player. I'm not saying anything about that, but I like the lineup they played and the way they had to play. They had to play with Barrett largely running the point. Of course, he's a shoot first point when he had to play it that way. He's not going to play point at the next level. But I thought the offense ran really well. It was all ISO ball, but it worked because Virginia's defense is actually best. They take away with the hard hedges on the screens. They take away your screen and roll game so much with all the flurry of activity behind that. They take away the dives well. They really limit your dribble penetration with that. When you made it more of a one-on-one game, well, it just happens that Duke's got 3 very good one-on-one players, and of course, 2 of those guys had career-type games against Virginia in that first win. So, now you're going to see a more traditional Duke attack. You're going to have Jones initiating. Barrett and Reddish more wing players. Barrett especially is going to be more of a wing player than he certainly was first time out. And so it's a different factor. And I just wonder if we can really learn any lessons from that first game because I expect Jones, he's going to play 30, 35 minutes. And so it's going to be a different Duke look and as a result, different responses from Virginia.
Yeah, absolutely. It's worth noting Tony Bennett said something on Monday that was interesting to me. He said you can watch all the film that you want, but unless you play the guy and you see him in person, it's really hard to evaluate him. So we can look at what Duke has done with Trey Jones on the floor. He's a really good floor general. He's a good passer. He's one of the nation's better on-ball defenders. You can certainly get him, again, with the aggression. You can certainly get him to, bite on a shot fake or a ball fake or get him to go after a steal and maybe beat him backdoor. But on ball, he's very good. I think one of the things I talked about earlier this week is Kihei Clark's ability to play against Jones rather than to have to play against Barrett. Clark is probably the one guy who's actually seen Trey Jones in person. They played each other on the Nike EYBL circuit, which is, the highest level of AAU basketball, essentially. But again, I think one of the things that's important to take away here is Duke will not have as much of a scoring threat bringing the ball up the court every single time. Whereas there were several possessions in that first game where R.J. Barrett just took the ball to the basket without making a single pass. That's not going to happen this time around. Trey Jones, good player. He fits the Duke system well because he can get it to Barrett and Williamson. But he's shooting 28% from 3. He's shooting just 49.6% from 2. He's not nearly the scorer that Barrett or Williamson is. The thing is, UVA is going to have to make a game plan that forces him to set up guys and then figure out how to stop the guys he sets up.
Yeah, he's careful with the ball. His assist to turnover ratio is astounding. You talk about the on-ball defense. He is a gambler too defensively. I would love it ideally if everybody was fully healthy. I think that this matchup is favorable to Virginia, more favorable to Virginia if Jones is in the lineup for 30, 32 minutes, because I like Ty Jerome bringing the ball up the court against him and being able to see over him. And also I think that Jones makes Kihei Clark more valuable to Virginia because Clark gives up inches to everybody, but he only gives up 4 or 5 to a guy, as you point out, Zach, that he knows well from having played AAU ball against him. So I think his presence there makes Clark more of a important role player for Virginia in this one. But we're not going to play. I don't think we're going to play with a 100% healthy Ty Jerome, and so I think that actually may make Jones more effective with his on-ball defense and also his gambling. He can gamble a little bit more when there's even a slightly gimpy Ty Jerome. I think that can actually make him more effective against Ty. Maybe that actually then counter to Virginia would be. Maybe Kihei Clark gets more minutes actually running the point, and you kind of move Ty off ball so that at least that takes that element away. The chess match aspect to this is just so fascinating. There's so many moving pieces that these two great teams have, and we really, even though they played a game, we don't know how it's going to turn out until we see them out there Saturday night.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Trey Jones, I think the biggest takeaway for me, having watched a decent amount of Duke and a lot of UVA, is that Trey Jones, when he's on the floor, he makes Duke's individual defense so much better. He's their best on-ball defender. Yes, he gambles a little bit, but he can guard the opposing point guard about as well as you could possibly want. Then you look on the other side of things, he's not quite the individual scorer that he has. So you take the ball out of Barrett's hands and Williamson's hands, at least to start the possession. What UVA is going to have to do a good job of is, instead of defending Barrett bringing the ball up the court, they're going to have to stop Barrett in the half-court sets and stop him from getting to the spots and then getting the ball in advantageous positions. It'll be interesting to see how UVA tries to attack that. I think Clark, again, is going to be their best option in terms of slowing down Jones and preventing him from getting his guys to his spot. But in general, you're looking at a Duke team that, across the board, a little bit better defensively, certainly on ball with Jones, but a little bit worse offensively on ball when Jones has the ball.
One thing I noticed last night, and it's a different matchup, watching Duke BC, Bowman getting into the lane against Jones, and Kai Bowman's only 6'1", about 180, but he had one blow by for a dunk that, of course, is a highlight reel kind of thing, and that's fine. But also he was able to score. He posted up Jones one time. Jones had his hand in his face, but he was able to get a good look on a turnaround shot from about 15, 16 feet, and able to get in the lane again and without size. Now Ty Jerome, again, if he's 100% healthy or even close to it, more size at 6'5", and he can finish, and that's what's been the difference with Ty last year and this year as opposed to his first year, is he gets in the lane and he finishes. He got that nice teardrop. He does have some ability to kind of back a guy in and score. So, that could neutralize that one ball a little bit. And again, I think that's more with Ty in an off-ball role more than maybe an on-ball role, getting the ball more from the wing and kind of backing his guy in. But I think there is some vulnerability there for Jones if he is matched up one-on-one defensively with Ty. Just in that sense, Ty's size it's an issue for a lot of college basketball teams. 6'5" point guards can be an issue, but and Ty's very effective in the lane.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing for Virginia is going to be, when they can get into the lane, which they were able to do, they have to finish at a really high rate, or they're going to have to kick it out and shoot the ball at a much better rate than they did at Duke. Yeah. Virginia got plenty of really good looks. I think one that sticks in my mind a lot and was kind of essentially the game wrapped up in a single possession was UVA forced a Duke turnover, and Kihei Clark was out in front of everybody. I think he was going to get chased down by Zion, and Kihei Clark wisely, instead of trying to shoot this layup and hope Zion doesn't block it into another hemisphere, decided to kick the ball out to Ty Jerome. Wide open three, perfectly set, and he just happened to miss the shot. If he makes that shot, it's a completely different thing. If two or three of those UVA players make those open shots, they probably go down and win the game. So again, it's going to come down to, can UVA win their one-on-one matchups? Jerome has done a good job of that, but of course we don't know what his status is. Kyle Guy is getting better at it, but he's still generally more of a three-point shooter. DeAndre Hunter is the one guy who constantly won his one-on-one matchups against Duke. The thing is, though, when Duke comes over to help, Virginia's going to get some open threes. That's just how basketball works, and this time they've got to be able to hit them.
Yeah, Virginia's a 41% three-point shooting team, and they made 3 of 17 in that game. And they were 21 of 28 in the lane in that game. So they were, as a result, Duke's collapsing because you're trying to take that away. It wasn't effective, but they're trying to take that away. You know, and sometimes you want to credit when a team shoots 3 of 17 from 3, you want to credit and say, hey, closeouts, or, you know, they were forcing up shots. No, that wasn't the case. I mean, this is anecdotal now. I'm just kind of going by memory here, but I don't really remember that too many of those 17 shots were forced shots, were end-of-shot clock shots, were shots with hands in the face. There were a lot of open looks there. You mentioned the Ty Jerome look off the Kihei Clark fast break. I'm remembering another one that folks would remember, the block by Williamson on the post shot that went straight into the hands of Kyle Guy, and he caught it in rhythm. Open look. I mean, you're not going to get a better open look than that. Any of those shots go in, you're right, Zach. You know, and this kind of leads me to talking about a strategy from Coach K we saw late in that game. Around 9.5 minutes to go, he unveils a zone defense, which is smart. If you're getting beat off the dribble and you're giving up 21 of 28 in the lane, hey, let's stop that right here. We're gonna go zone. We're gonna pack the lane and make you beat us from 3. You're going to get open looks there, but also if you're making shots before that stage, they're not going to go zone. So, you know, yeah, even if you make a couple of those early ones, you know, that takes that out of the arsenal of Coach K, and I'll presume that we'll see that again Saturday night, just as a way to maybe slow Virginia down.
Yeah, definitely. I think what's important to note, you mentioned, you know, the struggles beyond the arc. UVA shot almost 70% on non-threes. That means that they're obviously not only getting into the lane, but they're making 2-point shots as well. They're making 2-point shots as well, which means that UVA is really playing well in those areas. They're getting the shots that they want, and they're making them. They just didn't make those threes. And when you look at these two teams, you look at the Duke offensive profile, which is they want to get the ball to the basket. They want to be able to score quickly, and they want to be able to score in one-on-one situations, which allow Barrett and Williamson to get to the basket. Virginia, they want to move the ball around. They either want to get good looks at the basket or they want to shoot open threes, which they did a good job of. They just didn't do a good job of making those open threes. So I hate to say it all comes down to making shots and making threes, but when you look at the two offensive profiles of these teams, you have a Duke team that's very heavy on one-on-one scoring, and they should be considering the talent they have. And you have a Virginia team that's very dependent on scoring off of passes and maybe every once in a while getting a drive from Jerome or a drive from Hunter. But in general, you're looking for good offensive possessions from a team standpoint from UVA. They got those, and they just didn't capitalize. Duke, on the other hand, was just able to capitalize more often on good individual offensive possession.
Yeah, I hate the saying when you hear NBA coaches and players talk about the NBA being a make or miss league. You know, it's so cliche, but that was a make or miss game. Virginia got the looks they wanted. Yeah, you know, you hate to if you didn't, you know, watch the score, you just watched the way the teams played. Virginia, I mean, even the shots they missed were good shots, but they don't give you credit for missed shots that are good shots. That, you know, same as, you know, you don't get points taken off the board if you bank a 3 from the top of the key. I mean, just they go in. So, yeah, that was very frustrating to see. That Virginia ran the offense they wanted to. They got the looks they wanted. They got in the lane. It's the weirdest thing to say, but I think that's the best I've seen the UVA offense, and it's a pretty good UVA offense. But it's the best I've seen the UVA offense in years. I mean, you're getting in the lane consistently against this Duke team, and you know, you don't make the shots and you lose the game. How frustrating that can be. So, you know, one last thing I guess I'll bring up from an X and O standpoint, and I guess we kind of talked about it a lot already, but I'm curious in my own mind, and I have no answer to this. Maybe you do, maybe not. And I'm sure fans are thinking about this. The wrinkles that whatever wrinkles there may be to Tony Bennett's approach defensively. We know what worked for Duke in the first game. That individual one-on-one play. The pack line defense kind of puts guys on an island a bit. There is help behind, but there are times you're out there by yourself. What may be in store other than just simply play better. What Virginia can do to slow those guys down. You're not going to stop them, but at least maybe slow them down a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing, and the announcers I remember talked about this a little bit. Williamson, the guy is an incredible athlete. He's gigantic. He's a good basketball player. So you're right. That's hard to stop. I mean, he's probably going to be the national player of the year at this point, unless he completely falls off at the end of the season. The one weakness that he has is that he's not comfortable with his right hand. Obviously, you can, look at the dunk he threw down over Jay Huff and say that he is comfortable, but he does not like dribbling the ball all that much with his right hand. And there were a couple times in the game where UVA forced him to his right, and he kind of had to either swing the ball back out or dribble back out to the three-point line himself. So I think that's one thing. That's one area where Tony Bennett's saying, it really helps to see a guy in person. That's one thing that the players can feel. You can feel when a guy's not as comfortable with, one of the two hands or not as comfortable going a certain direction. There were a couple times, though, where UVA struggled and kind of had just a minor breakdown. For example, there was one area where Zion caught the ball on the right wing and drove toward the basket. There was really good help side defense. He had to kind of swivel and kick the ball back out. But the rotation was a second late, and Cam Reddish buried a three. And you're kind of sitting there thinking they did everything right except for being a split second late, and Duke ended up taking advantage of that. So I think the first thing to slow him down is to force him to his right. The second thing is having really, really good alert help defense. Duke is kind of a unique challenge, I would say, for UVA, because the thing that UVA does so well is that when they get beat, they help, but then they're also very alert to the three-point line and able to rotate back out. So I would say one thing that UVA might try to adjust is just maybe overemphasize the help a little bit. You saw, for example, Jay Huff made a block when he was simply standing in the way. He crowded the lane. Duke is a really poor three-point shooting team. They don't shoot the ball well, so I wouldn't be, the pack-line defense is predicated on no easy looks in the lane. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to be even more pack-line and say, we're not going to give you anything in the middle of the lane or near the basket. We're going to force you to kick the ball out. And if you don't kick the ball out, we're going to have, three guys in the lane maybe rather than just the help side defender that's normally there.
Yeah, those are all good observations. I noticed, too, early in the game, in the first game, Duke had I thought, an innovative approach to dealing with something that Virginia does great against really good post scorers, the post-to-post double that Virginia does. What a lot of teams do when you double in the post is you send a guard in there, and they'll double from the outside. So you've got the post behind the guy setting up in the blocks on offense, and then you've got a guy coming in, so you kind of crunch him that way. What Virginia does, they'll send the other big from the other side of the lane. And so you're sending Jack Salt or Mamadi Diakite, 7 feet tall, 6'9", Jay Huff 7'1", even DeAndre Hunter or Braxton Key at 6'8". And so you've got 2 6'8" or taller guys doubling a guy, and normally what happens there is the offensive player is smart enough to spin the ball out, and at least you've averted a low post scoring opportunity. But what Duke did several possessions early in that game was, instead of passing the ball to Zion Williamson in the post, they'd give him the ball on the wing and kind of clear out, just subtly clear out that side of the floor for him, and he could back his guy down. And so, it really, the spacing on the floor took away, at least at first, Virginia's ability to send that guy over for the post-to-post double. Now, Virginia eventually figured it out and started, doing more of what they normally do, post-to-post doubling, even with that arrangement. I'm not going to say they stopped him. They sort of slowed him down a little bit. Those doubles they were effective. In the last 5 minutes, he didn't see anything from Williamson. I think he had one missed free throw and one rebound in the last 4:52 or something like that. So, but you'll see. I guess you'll see that approach maybe now, kind of like you were saying, Zach. You got to see them on the floor before you can really get the feel for how good they are and what you need to do against them. But Duke was effective there. Now I'll expect they'll counter whatever their counter might be. But Virginia did at least figure something out with that and take away something that Duke had thrown in to throw a wrinkle into that pack line.
Yeah, I mean, it's a game of adjustments, and you saw that Virginia, the first adjustment they had to make is this was the first game that Trey Jones missed. Obviously, he got hurt early in the Syracuse game, but that, Duke has to change on the fly there. Duke was able to present Virginia with a, Trey Jones-less game plan, and UVA had to make that first adjustment there. So it's going to be a game of adjustments again with Trey Jones back. Duke has lost 2 games this year. One of them was to Syracuse without Trey Jones. The only game that they've lost at full strength was to Gonzaga early in the season, and Gonzaga kind of did what UVA has to do. I realize that was a much higher scoring game, but Gonzaga did what UVA has to do. Duke shot 5 of 13 from 3. That's, not anything special. That's a pretty good number for them, in fact. But what Gonzaga did is they hit 10 of 19 three-pointers. They shot over 50% from 3. Zach Norvell Jr., who's a really good player for them, hit 4 of 7. And Gonzaga, again, plays that man defense. They were able to frustrate R.J. Barrett, 9 of 25 from the field. Cam Reddish, 3 of 9. Zion still had a pretty solid game, 8 of 17, 22 points, 10 rebounds. But what Gonzaga did is they took advantage of every single Duke mistake. Duke turned the ball over 10 times. They really, they kind of struggled offensively. I know 87 points is a lot, but they struggled offensively because Gonzaga had the size inside and the ability to make things difficult inside for Duke, and they only ended up shooting 43.1%. Gonzaga's kind of maybe not a blueprint for UVA, but Gonzaga's a team that plays 2 big men to start the game with Brandon Clark and Rui Hachimura. They're a team that has some good three-point shooters who aren't, their guards aren't going to overwhelm you physically, similar to UVA's guards. So I think that's kind of the blueprint to beat a Duke team is to, 1, hit your threes, and 2, make life really, really difficult in the paint for Duke's offense. Force them to shoot threes. Duke does not want to shoot threes. They shoot a low percentage, and therefore they don't want to take a ton of them. If you can force R.J. Barrett to settle for some shots, any shot to me that R.J. Barrett takes outside of the paint is a win for any defense. He's a guy who, at his size, should be able to get to the basket, 3 out of every 4 times, but he's also shooting 31% from 3. So anytime he's not taking a shot in the lane, the UVA defense has done its job, and the Gonzaga defense did its job, way back in that early season clash.
So we've broken down the X's and O's a good bit here, and we'll probably revisit some of this before we get to Saturday. Let's look at a couple of the columns you've written this week, Zach. One that really plays into this as well. We've talked about it. Let's talk about it a little bit more in depth. Virginia using this break to their advantage, and we've seen different teams take different approaches. The ACC with 15 teams, what that means is, there's a schedule Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Everybody plays 1 game in that stretch, and then Saturday, Sunday you play a game. But with 15, that means somebody's got to take one of those little pods off, if you want to say. So we saw Duke last weekend. It was their time to be off, and they actually played a non-conference game with St. John's. We've seen Virginia do this a couple years ago. Actually, for a 2-year period, they played Villanova in that off week, home and home with Villanova in their otherwise ACC break in the schedule. But now we're seeing Virginia take the week off. Advantage to that is you get the week off. If you think there's a disadvantage, it is, hey, we're taking a week off. We're used to playing every 3 or 4 days, and now that rhythm's broken, and how when we come out Saturday night, are we going to come out flat because we haven't played for a week? So there are advantages, disadvantages, pros and cons. What's your examination of this, Zach? How do you think Virginia's doing with this off week?
Well, I think the first thing is that Virginia absolutely needs the off week. It's one of these things where they've played a lot of games. I believe 5 out of their last 8 have been on the road. So that's something where UVA could use the downtime. I talked about a little bit earlier. I talked about Kyle Guy as a guy who, a week off allows you 2 days for your body to completely rest. Let's, look at it the other way. It's those 2 days don't even exist. That one day doesn't really even exist when you're playing a weekend, weekday schedule because you have so little time to prepare. One of the things that I'm going to look forward to is obviously, 1, the week off is Ty Jerome going to be healthy. But 2, it's going to be a balance of how do you make sure that the guys get the rest they need, but also are able to ramp up to the intensity and the focus and the preparation that's required of a game against Duke. And Tony Bennett said it's a balance. It's not. There's no one way to go about it. UVA decided to take Monday off. Sunday obviously was going to be off following the game, but Monday they took off. That was kind of a decision probably made given how tough it's been the last couple of games. I think that it's a tough thing to say, we're going to – it's much easier said than done, I guess, to say, all right, we're going to be sharp, but we're also going to make sure our guys get rest. And different coaches go about it different ways. Some coaches are probably going to want to use that extra time to get some more practices in. Other coaches probably want to make sure that they get more time off in. I think the big thing for Virginia, though, is that they should be extremely well prepared. We talk about UVA; it always seems like they're very well prepared. And maybe the Duke game was the one time where they didn't quite have the defensive game plan they wanted. They should have the perfect defensive game plan with or without Ty Jerome. Obviously, offensively, things change a lot without Ty Jerome, but I think the week off, it gives you a little bit of time to rest, but UVA knows that this is a really big opportunity for them to make a statement and say, we are up here with the Dukes, with the best teams in the nation, and we deserve to be this top 5 team. UVA's been impressive in a lot of wins against some opponents that have clearly been outclassed. And I think if you look at UVA and you see an 0-2 record against Duke, especially with a loss at home, then you maybe question, is this team a top 1 or 2 team, or is it probably in that top 5 to 10 range?
Yeah, and I've been talking about this since the season started, with the anticipation that these matchups would be what they turned out to be. The first one was a matchup of 2 number 1 teams. This one's number 2 versus number 3. Yes, we know from last year, if you're a UVA fan, you know very well from last year that being the number 1 overall national seed doesn't do anything. When they throw the ball up in the air for the NCAA tournament, it means nothing. Everybody's 0-0 at that stage. But this year, maybe being a number 1 seed has something to it in the sense that if you're the number 1 seed in the East, you're playing in D.C. for the Sweet 16 if you are fortunate enough to get that far. And if you're the number 1 seed in the South, which, presumably if these 2 teams, continue to play at the level they're at, they're both going to be 1 seeds. But if you're number 1 in the South, you're in Louisville. So from a Virginia fan standpoint, and also from that support standpoint that, if you're playing the Capital One Arena in D.C. With 20,000 UVA fans rooting you on, maybe that's almost a home court advantage kind of situation to get you through a Sweet 16 Elite 8 game versus Louisville, Kentucky, which is a good plane ride away, 8 or 10 hour drive away. That's a more difficult proposition. You're probably on more even footing, certainly at that stage. Duke has fans everywhere, so to some degree it doesn't matter, but Coach K would prefer a short flight to D.C. or a short bus ride for some of his fans as opposed to that longer, slightly longer flight to Louisville. So there's those are the stakes. Yes, it doesn't matter in the end what the number beside your name is, but from a Virginia standpoint, boy, I have traveled on the road with this team, covered this team the last several years. When Virginia played in a Madison Square Garden in the Sweet 16, Madison Square Garden was John Paul Jones Arena North. It was 16,000 people wearing orange in that game. Now, they lost the game, but Virginia fans travel well for basketball, not for football, but for basketball they travel well. And, it is a boost. It is a boost to your chances to advance further on if you have more fans in the arena. So I say all that to say, all right, yeah, play Saturday night. You want to win the game for lots of reasons, but that's one of them. You're right. You're right, Zach. If you're 0-2 against Duke, I think that's out of the equation.
Right, and I think another thing that's important to note is I believe this is the first time UVA's played Duke twice in a single regular season since, I believe, the 2010-2011 season. Obviously, they've played them twice before. You look at the 2013-2014 season when Virginia won in the ACC tournament, but also lost against Duke during the regular season. If Virginia, I think, wants to be able to move forward and say, we're a legit team, I think most people appreciate them for being a very good team right now, but in the minds of a lot of people, if Virginia can defend home turf and split with Duke, Duke winning at Cameron Indoor by 2 points, I don't think really changed the perception on Virginia. I think people said, this is a team that can hang with Duke. If Virginia at full strength, and that's a big if, obviously, if Virginia can defend home court and say, we did what Duke did to us, we're right there with them, then that's a big boost for this team. The psychological advantage of being able to say, we beat Duke, we split with Duke, we think that we can hang with them when we're both at full strength, would be huge. And I think, Virginia, they've been really good at home. They've beaten Duke at home before. This is a great test for them. And I'm also not saying, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself and say, if Virginia loses this game, it's a huge failure and they're in trouble or whatever. We've seen teams before that lose games in the regular season or lose series in the regular season and go on to be just fine. But I think this is a really, really nice opportunity for Virginia to say, we're here to stay, and if they happen to fall to Duke this weekend, they're going to have to work their way back up to be able to say, we're one of the nation's top 2 teams.
And game days in town, and I bring that up. Well, yeah, that's fun. This is the 4th time game day will emanate from John Paul Jones Arena ahead of a UVA home game. And Virginia's 1-2 in these games. The one win over North Carolina, I believe that was the 2016 season. 2015 was the first time that Virginia had a game day, and they played Duke. And, so we talk about, it's a regular season game and all these things. That Duke team now, unlike either of these teams, that Duke team was reeling a bit. That was the Duke team that eventually won the national championship, but had lost 2 straight games. I want to say it was Miami at home and maybe NC State on the road. They were 4-3 in the ACC. Virginia at that time was 19-0, number 2 in the country. That was the year that Kentucky went 38-0 and lost in the Final Four. Virginia was looked at as an equal almost, not quite, but they were approaching the status of being equal. They were the last 2 undefeated teams. And Duke comes in reeling a bit and wins that game. And I remember, I covered that game, of course. I was there. I saw the Duke team as it ran down the tunnel on its way back to the locker room after winning that game. And a stunning comeback. Duke scored 22 points on its last 8 possessions. They were down 9 with 5 minutes to go, and they couldn't make a shot from anywhere, and then they couldn't miss in the last 5 minutes. I mean, it was a stunning victory just in that respect. And I feel like, that Duke team rode that win to what became the national championship that year. These games can have impact in that respect, and yes, then there's that prestige factor. Virginia still, this doesn't matter to the team, but from the fan standpoint and the visibility standpoint, yeah, the first thing you still hear announcers talk about when they talk about Virginia is UMBC. You go out and impress on Saturday night, you win the game, you beat Duke, you hold serve. And with that national spotlight with game day there, yeah, maybe the perception starts to change a bit. And, again, that's not as much for the guys in the locker room and the coaching staff in the locker room, but for everybody else, including everybody listening to this podcast, those are factors that you're hoping get answered Saturday night.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's always nice, especially from a program perspective, to win these marquee games. But I think, if UVA had gone down to Duke and won that game, then how much does that really change Virginia? They're still in line for a 1 seed. maybe they have a little bit more room for a slip up. But I think, as we talked about earlier, the difference between being a 1 seed and a 2 seed is probably, the home court advantage factor. But right now, Virginia's just focusing on, can we play our best basketball against the best competition? And, even looking past the Duke game, they've got really good games, on the docket. And they're getting, I think we started this point with what they're doing with the week off. This week off is going to give us a really good idea of what they can do in the next 2 weeks. If they take this week off and then come out and look refreshed and are able to beat Duke and maybe, even beat Carolina, this is going to be a really tough 2-game stretch in the span of 48 hours, by the way. But if they can come out refreshed and they can, beat Duke or, give a really, really strong effort to Duke, and then they can move forward with confidence against Carolina, it's going to be a tough stretch. And I think this stretch right now is going to determine, 2 weeks from now, are we talking about UVA as possibly the best team in the nation, or are we talking about them as maybe one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the ACC at this point?
Yeah, watching Carolina last night, just turning that game on, they ended up with 113 points, and they played their third string, if you want to say, the last 5 minutes of the game to get to 113 points. Wow. We're spoken so much on Duke for obvious reasons. 48 hours later, you got Carolina in Chapel Hill. I mentioned 2015. Virginia had game day, had Duke on a Saturday night. And that same time, they also had that same double. The ACC loves Virginia. They give you Duke at home on Saturday, Carolina on the road on Monday, 2 times in 5 years. That's a really pleasant scheduling little tidbit there for Virginia. But that Virginia won that second game against Carolina in 2015. That wasn't, though, as good a Carolina team as this Carolina team is right now. A few weeks ago, after that home loss to Louisville, you had to wonder, who is this Carolina team? All right, now, I don't think anybody wants to play this North Carolina team. They seem to really be gelling right now.
Yeah, they do. I mean, this is a Roy Williams team with an outstanding guard, Kobe White. I mean, I watch him play, and every time I watch him, I'm more impressed with his ability, as a ball handler and as a shooter. But I think what's important for UVA is that they have this week off to get healthy. Obviously, I think the tough thing is if Virginia loses this game without Ty Jerome, or with Ty Jerome clearly not 100%, then you don't really have too big of a takeaway there in terms of Virginia's national seeding. But if Ty comes out and plays 35 minutes and Virginia wins, then you're feeling pretty good. If Ty comes out and plays 35 minutes and they lose, then you're a little iffy on if this is really an ACC title contender with already 2 losses to Duke in a 48-hour turnaround. But again, I think the next 2 weeks, boy, we're going to have to be dropping podcasts like crazy. We'll have to have one on Sunday and one on Tuesday, and it's going to be a really fun 2 weeks. So I mean, I grew up watching Virginia basketball, hoping that they would pull off a miracle against a UNC or Duke, and now I'm watching them, be able to prove that they're the best team in the nation against UNC and Duke. So that's been, really cool. And I think, even if Virginia maybe struggles in the next 2 games, we shouldn't take what this team has done for granted, and we should still feel confident going forward that this is a team that can play with anybody in the nation.
I just wish it was Saturday at 6 o'clock. That's all I'm wishing right now. I'm ready. I want to go out and play right now. I actually want to dive on the floor for a loose ball. That's what I want to do. So, and Zach Hennard, we need to get Zach on. We have only scratched the surface. I'll get Zach on tomorrow or Friday. We need to go through more of what he's been writing this week on Augusta Free Press, getting us ready for the game, writing about all these potential postseason honors for UVA players. There's a nice column today about the All-America chances of the Big Three. So we'll talk more about that later this week. But we've spent about an hour getting you ready for it, and now we just have to wait 3 days for the game. So, Zach, I want to thank you for your time. We'll get you back on here in the next couple of days.
Yeah, thanks so much. We're looking forward to it.